2024 marked an important year for her sport as we made new connections and partnerships. One of the highlights was being accepted onto a global programme run by Adidas, the Adidas Breaking Barriers programme. We met organisations from across the world who in their own way contribute to breaking barriers for girls and women in sport. In a full circle moment, Adidas are proudly sponsoring the 2024 panel discussion with the theme of, you guessed it, breaking barriers. Joining us on tonight's panel is Béibhinn Parsons, the youngest Irish rugby player to make their international debut and Adidas ambassador, Conor Meyler, PhD student studying gender equality in sport and leadership, and Tyrone footballer, Lynne Cantwell, the most capped Irish women's rugby player and recently appointed Head of Women's Strategy at the IRFU. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
It gets very quiet when you're making your way from the back of the room up here. Great to see you all. Thanks for joining us. Lynne, Niamh just mentioned there your new job title. So how is the new role going and why did you decide to do it?
I purposely let Béibhinn go up before me so that I couldn't sit so close to you. that just backfired. So yeah, I just took on. I'm 3 weeks into the job with the IRFU, and why did I take it on? Look, I suppose people are aware of the journey of women's sport over the last decades and decades, but in my lifetime, probably 3 decades, and the story of how rugby has kind of fit into that. And there's lots of kind of complex things that contribute to why women's sport is where it is, and lots of very simple things, just like opportunity and so on. But one of the things that's really important is leadership at a board level, and obviously at a kind of CEO level and an executive level. And if a sport is ambitious to be able to look into the future and see what's possible and really want to go at it, it's very possible. But without that leadership, it's pushing closed doors or pushing an elephant up a hill. And not that fight isn't still worth it, but who takes on that fight is, determines whether or not you do it. So I suppose why I took it on is I think in the RFU at the moment there is ambition at a leadership level to make massive inroads, and I'm willing to go on that journey with them, and it's obviously been helped so much by what the girls are doing in the last couple of years, and it's great to see that. And I want the national teams are really important at the top, but the whole system build is probably something I'm really passionate about. And we know what we're building in women's sport has to be sustainable, and we're in the era where we need to build that system. So that's why I took it on.
There's a lot of experience there, and we all learn. That's our journey that we're on, because you were in South Africa before that, involved with women's rugby there too. What did you learn from that experience that you can bring with you here to your job now in Irish rugby?
I've said this before, and I spoke to Conor about it during the week. It's a very different country. There's 60 million people, and the landscape and the stage at which I went into South Africa was very different to what Ireland's at. So some things you just can't compare, but some things you can. I think South Africa are 30 years down their road of transformation from a post-apartheid era, and when they look at inequality, they really understand the need to provide opportunity in order for everybody to maximise their capability. So when you talk about gender transformation, it's the exact same principle. It's not that women are not capable of achieving what boys and men can do, it's just that they haven't had the opportunity. So I think that principle of opportunity is something that we can apply here. I know, and I'm sure there's lots of people in this room and on this couch that we all know we're capable of, and what we're seeing now and all these amazing women on the screen is women actualizing what they're capable of, and it's only because they've been given opportunities, and. So I think that's kind of the main principle that I'll bring across with me. As I said, lots of things we can't compare, and probably useful not to go into now.
Béibhinn, Lynne just mentioned there about the terrific year for Irish rugby last year. I mean, beating the Black Ferns, Australia in the 15s, third in the Six Nations, a World Cup to look forward to this year, and then in the sevens, qualifying, very, very first Olympics. What was that feeling like when you realised you qualified for that?
Qualifying for the Olympics was just pure relief. People think it's pure joy, but I think we all just took one massive sigh of relief when we did it. It's like this monkey on our back, and there were so many people that went through the program, and so many, like Emer said earlier, being part of the program, and there's so many things that had to align for us to actually qualify, and to be part of the lucky 12 that were there on the day was just such a privilege. But we have so much knowledge that we know that so many people contributed to that, so we're just the privileged ones that got to be there on the day and get it over the line.
And being part of the Olympics, like, what was that like? What was that whole experience like?
Yeah, it was hands down the best experience of my life. We did so much work on visualization and preparing and seeing the map layout and schedules, just so you wouldn't be awestruck when you got into the village. But all of that went out the window. As soon as I got there, I was just like amazed by everything, and seeing like these world-class athletes and being in the same building as Kelly Harrington and seeing what makes people tick. It was just amazing. And me and Erin, we were roommates, and she's there, so I'm looking at her. And we just looked and explored every inch of the village. And just when I thought my Olympics experience couldn't get any better, you got to run out in front of a packed out Stade de France with, Irish flags in every corner, and you could literally hear the voices of your friends and family that had travelled over, and it felt like you were playing in front of a home crowd at an Olympics. So it was just the best experience of my life. I ended up breaking my leg, but I'd do it all over again anyway.
Well, we're glad it was that good, so that's good to hear. Conor, you have been involved with Tyrone football for many years, injured at the moment, so not playing. That's why you're here with us, maybe not up in Oma tonight playing Derry. But who were your role models when you were growing up, and was playing for Tyrone something that you always wanted to do?
Yeah, probably from a young age. My dad was probably the first person for a lot of young men. Looked up to my father as someone who played for Tyrone, so that was always the goal. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to do that in 2015, made my senior debut. Right through to now at the minute, but injured, so the goal is still to get back. But yeah, but it's cool listening to even the likes of Rena there. Like even just watching women's sport growing up, people have mentioned Sonia and the likes as well. So would have always probably been a sports fan, without necessarily gendering it, being able to appreciate someone as being a good athlete, regardless of gender. So even the last couple of years watching the likes of Béibhinn playing and being able to say, look at her the same way as a Keelan Doris or Peter Romani, is they're a talented athlete rather than gendering it. And that's probably the hope, even with the research that I'm doing, that young boys can look up to women in sport, even the likes of Béibhinn and Erin here, as role models, not necessarily just as female role models. So,
had you always that awareness about gender, or what experiences lent itself to you that you stopped looking at just male sport and female sport?
No, it's a good question. Probably grown up in a house where I had two younger sisters who would have played a bit of club football. I did a lot of athletics growing up, so there wasn't much of a gender divide there. Going to schools cross country and athletics, and even competing at a regional, national level, it's a fairly gender equal sport, so that was a big part of it. Going to an all boys school then, didn't really see or know much different. And again, as a player then, as you get a wee bit older, you become selfish and you're quite tunnel visioned in your own sport, so I probably didn't see some of the inequality that went on within my own county. Fast forward to year 27, I was actually very conscious. We won an All-Ireland in 2021, and I didn't want my legacy to just be having a good year personally, and the team had success, but I was very conscious that's not something I wanted to be solely known for, was my Tyrone career. So I was part of a GPA motion then put forward for integration off the back of start my PhD. which was an interesting process that I wouldn't have been gifted academically. I had to work very hard for it. Was keen to do a PhD, as I say, because I wanted to push on professionally. Managed to stumble across, if you had tortured enough people to find out about the process, and was put in touch with Dr. Aoife Lane, who's become more than just a mentor. She's someone I really admire. Along with Aoife and Dr. Katie Liston, they've guided me to where I'm now. But the process started with just looking at gender equality in sport. And at the time, with the motion going forward for integration, it was like, well, there's no research done on this. There's very little research across the world in terms of how a successful merger, taking a men's association and a women's and bringing them together. Most people were just winging it. And from talking to some really intelligent people across the world who were part of those mergers, it was all a wee bit ad hoc. And my thinking was, well, can we put a bit of structure to this? Can we follow some sort of strategy plan to see how we could have a successful integration in Gaelic Games? So there was a steering committee set up then with the 3 presidents, the 3 CEOs, and former President Mary McAleese, which is now in place nearly 2 years. And as Rena mentioned earlier, with this plan of 2027. But to be honest, things are very slow to move. I recently last year published a policy brief on integration in Gaelic Games, of what it could look like, backed by some research, and then more recently in the last couple of weeks, some research on mergers and integrations in sporting organisations across UK, Australia, New Zealand, to try and give a bit of credibility to the research and what we can do in Gaelic Games. So yeah, that's where we're at the minute. I have high hopes like Rena, but the reality is things have been slow to move.
When you started playing international rugby, you came from an athletics background, Lynne, but when you look back and when you were very much involved in it, what were the barriers that you had to playing sport as a woman?
Rugby-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I was the same as Conor and Erin actually as well. I started as an athlete as well, so my experience was an individual sports person, and just played sport, just to get better as a sports person, or actually it was Rena who mentioned it as well. And I didn't take up rugby until I was 19 when I went to UL, and Conor will support this as well. I think we know that gender disparities show up in team sports more so than individual sports, for the reason I think individual sports is just the physical capacity of the athletes, and it's way more evolved. And the world achieved such success last year with the Olympics with 50-50 representation. So I think when I started playing rugby, look, I was a nerdy scientist that was down in UL, being a sports scientist. I took up rugby. I was fast, and I started playing down in Munster in UL, whereby there wasn't really barriers to girls playing sport, because it was just rugby mad province. But we kind of blissfully played for 6 or 7 years, probably until I got to the age or to more of a mature point in my life where I could look back and say, like, this is not right. When I went into the sport, I looked from an athletics point of view. You look at the systems and structures that are in place in rugby, and they were relatively amateur. But is that just amateur as in the age of the sport, or is that just really underdeveloped because it's been neglected and just largely not prioritised? And look, there's an element of both, because globally, men's rugby, if we just talk about rugby, is 120 years old, and women's rugby is 45, 50 years old, in Ireland, for example. So there's an element of age there, but to the point before I mentioned about opportunity, so much of it's governed by the opportunities that have been put in. So look, the barriers that were there at the time were lack of facilities, lack of funding, lack of daily training environment, lack of insight around female athletes, like zero sports science and medicine, competition structure, pathway. And when we talk about pathway, we take for granted that a boy might play a sport at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and there is a team for him to go to up and along. Whereas, for a girl, she might start at 7, a league might reappear at 9, maybe then 14, and before you know it, how many opportunities they're there for her to have dropped out, gone to another sport, or just not play sport at all. And I think that's what we're all feeling very passionate about. It's not about sport, it's about young women being healthy and having a good relationship with exercise for them to be physically healthy, but then kind of emotionally and mentally healthy. So they were the things that we experienced. I want to just clarify, we were blissfully unaware, we were in college having the time of our lives, but I think it's not until you grow up and you see more of the world and the reality of it, then you step back and say, whoa, we've just kind of not wasted 6-7 years of our lives, but we could be so much further on if we just had leadership and the right type of system in place in order to support our growth, which our male kind of counterparts do.
But how frustrating was that, though, at the time? Because you were really successful, yet that success wasn't being backed by other people, possibly the IRFU at the time as well, maybe weren't as good as they are now towards women's rugby. So how frustrating was that for you to notice this as you go on in your career, realising we're not getting the fairness here?
Yeah, look, it is frustrating. And again, as a 43-year-old woman, I look back and just go, and that's the motivation to ensure that's not what the future looks like. But one thing I do maintain, and this is my nerdy scientist coming out in me and the kind of technical rugby nut that I am, you have to know your game. So one of the opportunities we did have is that we had an incredible technical director at the time in the IRFU and a personal mentor to me for a long, long time, who taught us how to play rugby really, really well. And what we achieved in 2013 and 2014 was genuinely just that we were playing the sport, literally the sport, at an exceptionally high kind of mastery level at a time when the world really weren't really playing that. But that just speaks to, if you give opportunity, then that's what you can achieve. So I think I still maintain that, is that there's, this is quite a complex thing. We're talking about equity and, removing the barriers so that females and girls can flow through it. But, at a fundamental level, because we're talking about sport, you have to be good at your game. And I think that's why in this era, daily training environments and coaching is really, really key, so that girls have the opportunity to progress, but they're good at their sport, so that we can progress at an international level, but at a young girl's level. If I'm a you and Rena will attest to this, if I'm a 6-year-old girl, and if I take up a camogie stick when I'm 9, I've probably lost it already. Whereas if I'm a 6-year-old girl, and if I pick up a camogie stick, or I'm taught how to play the game, I'm going to have a great relationship with that stick, and I'm going to play that game for the rest of my life. And it doesn't matter if you play county football, but you're going to have just a good kind of quality of life through sport. So look, I've said a few things there. Anyway, you can tell my thoughts on it. But that was kind of my experience of the Blockers and Marys at the time.
Béibhinn, for you, it was 19. I know Emer spoke earlier. She was older as well when she started playing rugby. But you started, I think it was under 9s. Was it that you started playing with Ballinasloe? Was it?
I started playing for the mixed team in Ballinasloe, and the requirement at the time was 1 girl. That's all you needed to have a mixed team. So the boys in my class were like, please, we really think we mightn't win in the boys league, but we'll definitely win if we play in this mixed league. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I played for that 1 season and I really, really loved it. But then after that, there was no more, teams for me to play on. So I just went back to Gaelic football. And then I think it was maybe under 14s or under 13s where there was a team set up, a solely girls team in Ballinasloe, and we had like 50, 60 girls coming to training twice a week, and it just took off in such a big way, and the fruits that were like the seeds that were sown then, like we can see it now. There's 3 girls on the team from that Ballinasloe team, the Irish team now, that was on that Ballinasloe team. So it just took off massively, and I loved it, and I just never went back.
And what was it about rugby that you particularly loved?
I don't fully know. I think I love that there's just such an array of personalities, shapes, sizes, and like it wasn't like you're GA team where everyone sort of looks the same and acts the same. Like, I felt like rugby was a sport for everyone, and I was just really drawn to that, and it was so enjoyable, and we had so many numbers at training, and we did so well in those early days, and that enjoyment like really fuels you and springboards you forward. I think like they're the memories that you look back on and you cherish, no matter where you play, what continent I play in now. I know that some of my favourite memories are just in some muddy pitch in Ballinasloe.
Conor, in terms of, we're speaking about your research and in terms of that gender equality, so there's a lot talk now about we need to have more allyship with men. In your research and what you've seen and men that you know, why do you feel maybe for some men it's difficult for them to publicly support female athletes?
Yeah, good question. Even before I go into the support, if you look at the research, men still hold a lot of the leadership positions, especially decision-making positions as we move up through the ranks. And although we're progressive in the sense that we have a lot of quotas at the moment, I think actually 2024 is the first time the GA, IRFU and FA had actually met the gender quota of 40%. The problem with some of the quotas is that we want people in decision-making positions who can implement change rather than having a token woman on the board who potentially doesn't have any say, because to implement change, which there's the power in having Lynne in her role is in a leadership position, like she can implement change, and then it's a case of having it multi-cyclical where it doesn't take someone strong like Lynne to come in and make change and then all of a sudden the good work's undone. So there's a piece in educating men who are in positions already about the need for gender equality on our boards. The big thing for me is if we can educate a younger generation so that the next generation, like if we grow up in a generation now where, and this is the vision I have for Gaelic Games, if we were to have an integrated association, like you have a young boy and a young girl go down to the local club, like they know no different. If you're a young girl growing up in England, you can play professional soccer. That's a reality, that's something you can do. If we can educate young boys now that when they get into leadership positions, they know no different. And Lynne opened my eyes in a conversation about even Scandinavian culture, where it's built on a philosophy where equality is something is a core value that they have, and they laugh at the thought of having gender equality because they've been doing it for 70, 80 years. So that becomes the culture. So there is a case of having systems, policies and strategies in place where we have to give women opportunities to a point where that just becomes the cultural norm, where young boys go and watch female sports and know it no different, and young girls will go and support the men and know it no different. The male allyship thing, yeah, and I've done a bit of traveling and I try to talk to people who are a lot more educated and smarter than me in this space, and try to get an understanding for different countries and cultures and all the rest. But in Irish society, and I'm generalising, but I feel like we're quite traditional and parochial, especially in Gaelic Games, which is one of our greatest strengths. You play for your club and your county, but it can also hold us back then in terms of forward thinking and vision. Within the men's game in particular, it's still quite a case, in my eyes, don't say too much and don't question things. And I've probably got some flack in the past for questioning things.
What type of flack have you got?
Well, even at a governance and national level, like you might get flack of just no media, like don't be saying anything or don't be doing anything, or just watch what you're saying in the media. We don't want to challenge or upset anybody. But as a male player as well, the real gripe I have is, I'm conscious there's young people in the room, but I will get abuse, verbal abuse, for being an advocate or an ally for gender equality, like very verbally on a pitch. And I'm not naive to the fact that there's going to be verbals and a bit of stick here and there in a game. If you miss a shot or you get turned over, whatever. But my gripe is that's when you've got 7 or 8 players in a team who are coming up and saying similar things to you, and they're going to question your motives or they're questioning your sexuality over research you're doing, which again should be benefiting everybody. My thing with integration and looking at a Gaelic Games Association is we can all grow together. This doesn't have to be a case that if we integrate, it's men's loss is women's gain. And yes, there's a huge disparity in terms of finance and facilities, but we can all grow together. We can have an integrated association where everybody benefits, and that's the vision that I have. And to do that, you need men on board. Some men will give you the pat on the back behind closed doors to say, you're doing good work, keep it up. And I'm thinking, yeah, but there's no point coming to me, telling me stories about issues you've heard, issues you've seen, things you've let slip, and know that you're not doing anything about it because you're too scared to challenge authorities or your teammates or whoever the powers be. And as I say, when you've got opposition players then coming and targeting you and saying certain things, and I nearly got a feel it's like, has this been discussed or something, because why are you all saying the same thing here? And then we'll stand for banners united for equality, or the opposite. Some counties won't do it because they feel it's a distraction. I'm like, how unsure of you are you in yourself that standing for a banner united for equality, saying that we support integration and we support the women's game, that you're not even comfortable doing that? And again, probably for me then, even the first time that happened and talking to Aoife and Katie about it, it was like, am I doing the right thing here? Like, because you start to question yourself. I suppose only on my own journey of self-awareness and self-excavation, you dive a bit deeper. It's like, no, I want to stand for something bigger than just me. Now, I mightn't necessarily directly benefit from an integration. You know, there will be a huge benefit for the women in the sense that technically the GA own all the pitches. You know, in terms of funding, the disparity is 12 times, you know, what the GA is making compared to LGFA and Camogie. And you've nearly hit a glass ceiling in some sense within LGFA and Camogie of how they can grow the game. So even opportunities of pitches, warm showers, food after training, mileage expenses, that's the reality, sadly, is in 2025. A lot of inter-county players aren't getting that. So to narrow that gap would be a good start. And yeah, as I say, just having a vision for something bigger than just myself. You know, Béibhinn talked about planting seeds for trees that you mightn't actually sit under the shade of, but you know you've left an impact for other people to benefit. And as I go back to that young boy and girl who go down to their local GA club, and if you're a father or mother and you take them down and all of a sudden you send off your young son and daughter and they go down to the same pitch and know that they're going to get the same opportunities. Like Lynne spoke about opportunities, that's the big thing for me. Whether people go off and do anything with their sport, that's up to them, but give them an opportunity where they can progress in a system that allows them to flourish.
For you, when you were playing male allies, did they support you, Lynne? Looking back, are you a bit frustrated maybe they could have supported a little bit more, or what would you say about that?
Yeah, like as I said, our technical director at the time was a guy. He was wonderful, and like he taught us our game, you know. So when I look at that's incredible. And it's so hard because no, like there weren't a lot of guys. There definitely wasn't players, for example, that could see it, or coaches or anything like that. And you look at them and you just think, you could say, you know, they're busy just being national players and they're focusing on their game, as all international players do. However, I had a recent really interesting conversation with Donegal Callahan, who was a player at the time as I was, and there was one instance where we were both playing the Six Nations, and we both happened to have the last Six Nations game in Wales, and we both finished. And the boys were in their hotel and they had a big function, and we didn't have a function, but we happened to be out on the town, and we went to the hotel, and there was like, you know, we had to kind of hustle our way in, you know, and that wasn't just trying to be close to the boys, believe me at all, you know, you're just on a night out at the end or whatever. But it was just really, you know, when you look at it, it's just not nice. You know, it was just horrible to think that, like Donegal said to me, he said, we should have stood up for you that night. Like, I think it was Gervin Dempsey came out to us, and one or two of us were trying to get taxis home, and they, you know, he waited with us to get a taxi home, and that was lovely. But was it lovely? It just shouldn't have happened. You know, I think that's the point. So at the time you're going through it, and you just have this baseline level of operating that you think that's as good as you are, but it's not at all, you know. So I think We didn't. No, there were some really good, like Paul O'Connell was great at the time, but these were kind of peers that probably saw the world of rugby through the same lens, saw that we were training really hard, was training beside us. And I think that's the thing, when you strip it all back, when you're just training as athletes, boys and girls are the same and they treat each other the same. I think when you're removed from that, you don't at all. John Hayes was a great advocate at the time, but I suppose I'm trying to call out the supportive males that were there, but equally there's a hell of a lot that weren't there too. But I think things are changing to a degree. But to Conor's point, the need for better representation is to avoid groupthink and unconscious bias and so on. And we hear a lot of people talking about, oh God, I've got daughters now, and there's some criticism around that too. You should say you don't have to have a daughter or a niece to be able to see the world through their lens. But I think there's a reality that when you have a daughter or a niece or a sister that is going through it, you see their day, you see their week, you see their month, and you see that that's not the same as mine if I'm a boy, and you see what they come home with sometimes, and you see, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she went to rugby, and she plays a few different sports. We just try her out in a few things, and I sat her down one day and I was just like, hey, just tell me what she liked doing during the week and stuff. And she said, oh, hey, look, I'd like one a little bit less. And I could see that she was kind of looking at me, and she was like, oh, I just like rugby a little bit less. And I was like, okay, even though my heart was dying, but I just like, oh, how come? And she said, just nobody looks like me. And I was like, okay, oh my God, okay, don't cry, And then I was like, oh, and she just said, oh, I just don't feel welcome. And I'm like, you're seven. How do you even know what the word welcome means? And I think when you're going through it, when you're seeing little kids going through that, you're just like, there's so much we could do better, So I think once there's more of that, and there's more understanding of the reality of groupthink, that if we're all look the same, then why are we all in that room? There should just be one person in that room that thinks the same and looks the same, and the rest of us should be different, because we're going to make a good collective decision that's right for what we're doing, and that's obviously the goal. But yeah, plenty to go yet.
I'm just keen to talk as well, and before we finish up, just about rugby, and you mentioned earlier on, Béibhinn, about that's one of the things you love about it, that it welcomes so many people, different sizes, different shapes. Not everybody looks the same. When we have a problem at the moment with so many girls dropping out of sport and so many girls not transitioning from sport from primary school to secondary school, and they talk about their body image and they're very self-conscious about that, what do you say to those girls and the hope and advice for them to stay involved in playing rugby and in playing sport?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a real-life issue that people deal with at every level of sport, no matter if you're playing in your local club or playing at the elite level. It's definitely something that I know, like, my teammates deal with and loads of people do. So I think it's trying to shift your mindset of not how I look, but like how do I perform. And we talk a lot about our fighting weight and stuff like that you don't find it, it finds you, and you play your best rugby, and then whatever you look like when you're doing that, it's about how you perform and how you feel in your body, and it's not about how you look. It's definitely a hard thing to navigate, especially when you're young, and maybe if you're growing up and there's lots of, media is growing, which is brilliant, and we want that, but it does put extra pressure on how you look and things like that. So it's a real life issue, and initiatives and projects like the Adidas Breaking Barriers, they make sport a safer place to be, and they put so much research into making it accessible and equitable, and her sport as well, like showing all different shapes and sizes, and not just picking aesthetically pleasing photos. It's sport is ugly sometimes, and showing that side of it too it's just real life. So I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers. I definitely don't, but yeah, it's definitely a real life issue, and it deserves to get its time in the limelight and in the media.
I'm going to finish up with some predictions. Conor, Tyrone this year, new manager, Malachy work, everyone's talking about Sam Maguire already.
Well, we're going to win the night, so that's a good start. Derry had one over us for a couple of years, but there's a bit of buzz and excitement definitely within the camp, and with the new rules and the sort of quality players we have. some older boys coming back and new boys coming through. We're ambitious, that's what I'll say.
Okay, so put it down for Tyrone for Sam this year then. Lynne, you're starting your career. I mean, there's so much, or not new career, but your new role in your career, but there's so much to look forward this year with the World Cup coming up as well. Open that crystal ball. How are we going to do?
Oh dear. Look,
with Béibhinn beside you here.
Everybody backs the girls, and I think they're definitely on the crest of a wave, and more to come. I think, you know, what we want to do from a union point of view is to really drive the fan engagement piece this year. We really want to really latch on to what we're trying to do, you know, in rugby, like we're trying to do in soccer and Gaelic games, is to get women and men supporting what we're trying to do, the movement of it. So we want the event in Cork and in Kingspan for the Six Nations, all of the warm-up games for the girls in the build-up to the World Cup, for girls and men and boys and little girls to go and to know that it feels different, you know, to it be a family-friendly environment whereby you go and you know that this is different to a boys' game. So, you know, that's kind of what we want to try and do, and hopefully that kind of support off-field, that 24th man, woman off-field will allow the girls to go as far as they can in the World Cup.
And Béibhinn, final words with you. There's lots to look forward to.
Yeah, I think with the girls beating the Black Ferns and then them being in our pool, I think it's just given us so much belief that, you know, anything is possible, and the growth that the girls have had over the past few campaigns has been immense, and I've no doubt that it's going to stay going in that direction. So I've had people come up to me saying that they've booked work off until the World Cup final, so there's no pressure, but no, I've full belief that the girls can go all the way.
Yeah, well, we all here wish you so much luck for the year ahead. Please give a warm round of applause once more to Conor, Béibhinn and Lynne.